Donald Trump has been indicted on conspiracy charges. They say he conspired to defraud the U.S. They twist his words to make it seem like he was doing things he wasn't actually doing. And their argument is Trump knew full well he lost the 2020 election, and he and his co-conspirators attempted to lie to the American public and the government to try and steal power. I'm just going to say it outright. There is not a single cell, a single atom in the body of Donald Trump that thinks he lost 2020. And the idea that you can claim Trump secretly believed he lost the election and was lying about it, I mean, that's just absolutely absurd. You can't simultaneously claim the man's an egomaniac and he puts his name on everything, but that he also thinks he could lose an election in 2020. No, Trump genuinely believed this. And more importantly, he was acting on advice of counsel. He had lawyers telling him what to do. Now, of course, Jack Smith, the man prosecuting Donald Trump, is claiming that those lawyers are actually his co-conspirators. Well, how about that? You got to look at this indictment, man. I'll bring it up and I'll show you. It's fascinating. They use things like Donald Trump saying to remain peaceful and not to be violent was proof that he was trying to instigate January 6th because he should have said leave. And that he was saying stay peaceful to imply they were peaceful. It's like, yo, you ask Trump to make a statement. He says, everyone's just stay peaceful, okay? And they go, aha, that proves it. And that's where we are. But my friends, ladies and gentlemen, the fix is in. Take a look at this story from the Daily Mail. D.C. judge who will oversee Trump's criminal case is the toughest punisher of the January 6 rioters and worked for a law firm associated with Hunter Biden. I love how they say associated with Hunter Biden, because my understanding is it is a law firm where he worked. Now, you can argue what does that really mean? They work at the same company. It's one big happy family tree, son. And you'll see soon when they arrest Donald Trump for treason, to borrow the line from Rap News. I'm being facetious. I don't think they're actually going to try Trump for treason or anything like that. Just playing with words there. But the point is this. It's a big club and you ain't in it. Trump ain't in it either. You know what I think? I think Donald Trump wasn't supposed to win in 2016, but he did. They thought he was going to lose. They had plans he was going to lose. Hillary Clinton got really angry. She was supposed to win. It was her turn. You see, she was supposed to win in 2008. But Barack Obama came up and he won. He took it from her. And that was it. And they said, yeah, well, hold on. You know, once Obama is out, it will be your turn. So what happens when it's not her turn? Oh, boy, is she angry. And the Bidens, they're all part of the same club. It is the establishment. It is the uniparty. Now, I got to be honest. I'm not completely convinced that the uniparty is as unified as people might assume. I think it's more like this. You take a look at, say, like the Bush administration. I think they oppose each other in the same way that, like, when you're playing cards with your friends, you oppose each other. You might have disagreements on which sporting team you want to win, but you're still cracking that beer, cheers, ordering the pizza and wings, and watching the game. And that's what it's like. They're all one big happy family tree, right? They're all part of the same club, but they want to run things a little differently. So long as they stay within the confines of how things are supposed to go, seems to be okay. That means if it was like Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush won, they'd be angry, but they wouldn't be that angry because they know it's like, okay, well, I guess I didn't get it. But when Donald Trump wins, they're like, this guy ain't in the club. Okay, he's rich, he's powerful, but he was not supposed to win. And then Trump walks in and says, listen, we're going to do these things. And they're like, no. You're allowed to do only A, B, and C, not 1, 2, or 3. And Trump says, I'm going to do whatever I want. And here we are. Take a look at this. Federal Judge Tanya Chutkan, previously labeled as the toughest punisher of January rioters, had previously worked for the same firm. Look at this. D.C. federal judge who was picked to oversee Trump's case, the toughest punisher. In a profile by the AP written last year, they said Chutkan has handed out tougher sentences than the DOJ was seeking in 7 cases, matched its request in 4 others, and sent all 11 riot defendants who have come before her behind bars. The article titled In January 6 Cases, One Judge Stands Out as the Toughest Punisher. You get it, right? It's because she's evil. It's because she does not exist to pursue justice as our country dictates, as our traditions dictate, as the law, equality, and fairness dictate. She seeks to serve as a weapon and cudgel for a corrupt political elite. Donald Trump is no savior. Donald Trump is no saint. Donald Trump is not some powerful individual come to save you from the corrupt establishment elites. Donald Trump is but one thing: a wealthy, successful real estate, reality TV guy who wanted to be president, who has his own business interests, but was not part of the uniparty establishment. That's it. Vivek may be a little bit more of these things, someone who actually may stand up and do away with these cultural evils and things like this. But I would not assume any of these men are Superman or anything to that effect. There are a lot of people who look at Trump and think he's this God, emperor, savior. Nah, he's just a guy, a successful guy, a brash guy, a guy with a plan. But I don't see Trump as some guy who's like here to rescue America from the bowels of hell or anything like that. I see a guy who had his own personal agenda, thought he was going to run for president, wanted to do certain things, said he'd keep his promises to the American people, certainly had his own agenda, as I've stated, to profit and gain for himself. Who doesn't? And they said no. And they don't like what he's doing. They don't like what his plan is. They don't like his promises to you. And they're going to do everything they can to keep him out. They say this. Let's read some more. Other individuals caught during the insurrection included Texas mortgage broker, blah, 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 blah. The 61-year-old was nominated by former President Obama, born in Jamaica and graduated from the University of Pennsylvania's law school. Chutkan had worked at the law firm Bowies Schiller Flexner in 2002 until she was confirmed as a federal judge in 2014. Bowies Schiller's strong connections to the Democratic Party and then second son Hunter Biden, whose dad, President Biden, is likely to face Trump in the 2024 election, was of counsel at that firm from 2009 to 2014. It is not known if the two ever had any interaction. To put it simply, she worked at the same place and the same time as Hunter Biden, a guy who is currently facing serious scrutiny for criminal activities. But he's getting a slap on the wrist. He's getting a pass. Aaron Blake tweets, Trump faces 78 total criminal counts between the two Jack Smith indictments and Manhattan. You know what I think? I think that the confidential documents indictment were to soften the blow. They come on, they say Trump had confidential documents. They say he's being criminally charged. And so what? It's not the biggest deal in the world. It is serious. They're like, wow, they've criminally charged a former president. But what's the reality of the indictments? They're not that serious. I mean, it's serious. Don't get me wrong. But what's happening now with the 2020 election fraud charges and the January 6 charges is substantially more serious. I think their strategy was if they come out and indict Trump on 2020, it is a shock to the system. Too shocking, in fact. They need to soften the blow. So what do? First, the indictment you hear is tax stuff and whatever in New York City. Local charges. And it's like, wow, I can't believe that happened. And then Trump goes there. They say, blah, 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 and then he leaves. Then he gets the federal indictments for the confidential documents. And everyone's like, wow, I can't believe it happened again. You see, what they're doing is increments because they can't just come out and say, we are going to imprison our chief political rival. This is reminiscent of basically every single country that's gone through a civil war or revolutionary period. I've been reading more about a bunch of different things, from Spain to Weimar Republic, even Italy, which is a bit different, but World War II, all very interesting times. The Bolshevik Revolution. You look at how these things take place and what happens when major upheaval occurs in these countries. Additionally, I personally experienced the Second Revolution in Egypt. I see these things happening, and I see what's happening in the U.S. And while it's not, if you get granular, if you zoom into the micro, these things have similarities, but they're different. But if you zoom out to the macro, you see it's the same thing. Major upheaval in law, abject corruption among your political elites like Joe Biden, engaging in very serious crimes, stealing money, et cetera, et cetera. And then when there's economic crises, some kind of emergency, political upheaval, attempts to jail political rivals, we're here. I'm looking at the indictment, and I got to tell you, no matter which way this cuts in terms of narrative, whether it be the Democrats' narrative or the Trump supporter narrative, history will be viewed at this time similarly to every other revolutionary period. Put it simply, you take a look at Weimar Germany, the beer hall push. You've got Adolf Hitler storming into the beer hall, firing a gun in the air, and an attempt to overthrow the Weimar Republic and stuff like that. And they arrest him. He goes to jail. He then writes Mein Kampf. And then over the next couple decades, you know what happens with the rest of it. You look at it in that context, and you try and compare Trump to Hitler as the Democrats have done, and you could write a similar story. January 6th, the January 6th insurrection. Donald Trump and his supporters tried to storm the Capitol to overthrow the government. Trump was subsequently criminally charged and arrested for it while in prison, blah, blah, blah. Granted, Trump's a lot older. If he does end up going to prison, I don't think he gets out and then runs because he'll be like in his late 80s or something like that. But it could be Trump Jr. Who knows? Who knows? First, before we get into I want to make sure I briefly mention Trump's 6 co-conspirators described in the DOJ indictment revealed. Yes, his co-conspirators, Giuliani. Do they have the? There's the indictment. Co-conspirator 1 is Giuliani. Then we have co-conspirator. Look at this picture of Giuliani. Co-conspirator 2, John Eastman. This is amazing. A conservative attorney who advised Trump. Sidney Powell, co-conspirator number 3. She's 68. Wow, I didn't realize she was that old. Jeffrey Clark, co-conspirator number 4. Well, that one's really amazing. We've had him on the show, I think more than once. Co-conspirator 4 is described in the indictment as a Justice Department official who focused on civil matters and worked with Trump to use the Justice Department to open sham election crime investigations and influence state legislatures with knowingly false claims of election fraud. Knowingly false. How do you know someone lied about something? This is the reason why it's very hard to go after people for perjury. Proving they knew they lied is difficult. This is why it's so hard to go after people for defamation. Proving someone knew they lied is very difficult. If someone says something that's incorrect, how do you prove they're lying? They may genuinely believe it. I think all of these guys genuinely believed it. And I can tell you, I've talked to these guys and it is frustrating. Steve Bannon sitting here with me and we're arguing fraud. And I'm like, I don't think so. I think Trump got anti-elected. They shut down everything, sports, movies, you name it. They then blasted on TV to everybody locked in their cubicle apartments that Donald Trump did this thing. It's his fault and you got to go vote. Then they delivered the ballot to their homes with universal mail-in voting. Come on. This is why everything changed. Procedural manipulation. Cleverly done. But I digress. Kenneth Chesebrough is the 5th co-conspirator and the unknown political consultant. Nobody knows who exactly that is. Interesting. Take a look at this from Michael Tracy. Trump was continuing to perpetuate the grand criminal conspiracy by tweeting out "Stay peaceful and no violence" on January 6, according to the brilliant legal mind of Jack Smith. Kid you not. In the indictment, it says, the defendant repeatedly refused to approve a message directing rioters to leave the Capitol, as urged by his most senior advisors, including White House counsel, a deputy White House counsel, chief of staff, deputy chief of staff, senior advisor. Instead, the defendant issued 2 tweets that did not ask rioters to leave the Capitol, but instead falsely suggested the crowd at the Capitol was being peaceful. Huh? Yeah. Example 1. At 2:38 p.m., please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful. 3:13. I am asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful, no violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you. Are you serious? Because Trump asked people to stay peaceful twice, he was actually secretly arguing they were peaceful, is the most psychotic thing I have ever heard. This is more so Trump bumbling. I don't think Trump sat there and said, I can't actually ask them to leave. I'll pretend they're peaceful. Are you kidding me? And this is what they want. This is what they want to use to go after Trump. Jonathan Turley says, Special counsel Jack Smith just issued the first criminal indictment of alleged disinformation, in my view. If you take a red pen to all of the material presumptively protected by the First Amendment, you can reduce much of the indictment to haiku. I felt that the Mar-a-Lago indictment was strong. This is the inverse. This is closer to the case against former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, where Smith was overturned by a unanimous Supreme Court decision. The press conference held by Smith only deepened the unease for some of us. Smith railed against the January 6th riot and made it sound like he was indicting Trump on incitement. He didn't. The disconnect was glaring and concerning. I want you to see this portion here. This one's very interesting. Section 80, page 30 of the indictment. Also on the morning of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 met with the defendant at his White House, again, without having informed senior Justice Department officials, and accepted the defendant's offer to become acting attorney general. This is clearly Jeff Clark. On the afternoon of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 spoke with a deputy White House counsel. The previous month, the deputy White House counsel had informed the defendant that, quote, there is no world, there is no option in which you do not leave the White House on January 20th. Now, the same deputy White House counsel tried to dissuade co-conspirator 4 from assuming the role of acting attorney general. This is really interesting. Let's say this. Co-conspirator 4 met with the defendant at the White House without having informed senior justice officials' departments and accepted the defendant's offer that he become acting attorney general. They go on to say this, co-conspirator 4 spoke with the deputy White House counsel. On afternoon, spoke with the deputy White House counsel. The same deputy White House counsel tried to dissuade co-conspirator 4 from assuming the role of acting attorney general. The deputy White House counsel reiterated to co-conspirator 4 that there had not been outcome determinative fraud in the election, and that if the defendant remained in office nonetheless, there would be riots in every major city in the United States. Co-conspirator 4 responded, well, deputy White House counsel, that's why there's an insurrection act. Also that afternoon, co-conspirator 4 met with acting attorney general and told him that the defendant had decided to put co-conspirator 4 in charge of the Justice Department. The acting attorney general responded that he would not accept being fired by a subordinate and immediately scheduled a meeting with the defendant for that evening. On the evening of January 3rd, the defendant met for a briefing on an overseas national security issue with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and other senior national security advisors. The chairman briefed the defendant on the issue, which had previously arisen in December, as well as possible ways the defendant could handle it. When the chairman and another advisor recommended that the defendant take no action because inauguration day was only 17 days away, and any course of action could trigger something unhelpful, the defendant calmly agreed, stating, yeah, you're right. It's too late for us. We're going to give that to the next guy. Let me say this. I was talking on Timcast IRL about making movies. And one thing I've always really wanted to do is make short films that invert the narrative of popular movies. There's a joke about Star Wars that A New Hope is a movie about a young kid from a desert planet who's radicalized by a religious extremist into taking a cargo ship and blowing up a military base. Yeah, that's Star Wars. Luke Skywalker meets an old Jedi in ancient religion. He then takes the Millennium Falcon, which is a smuggling ship, the cargo ship, and they go on a mission with a bunch of extremists and they blow up the Death Star. Now, the funny thing is, people were saying, yeah, but it's the Death Star, man. It's like a weapon. They blew up a planet with it. The Death Star was called Project Stardust. So my idea was like, it would be fun to make an inverse propaganda film where Darth Vader, Darth being just a rank in the military, was a disabled veteran, a war veteran, who was leading the armed forces and was attacked by religious extremists, and they blew up the Project Stardust, it was called. And they don't call it the Death Star. That's propaganda. You can invert the narrative. The reason I bring this up is I look at this story and I think about where we go in 50 to 100 years. And it really depends on who wins today. The narrative will be written by the victors. This is an attempt to reframe and rewrite what happened these days. There is no reality in which a mustache-twirling villain Donald Trump says, I know that I lost, but I will steal power, and then uses force lightning on some unsuspecting young people trying to stand up to defeat him. The reality is much more boring than that. Donald Trump, seeing what happened in this country, genuinely believed there was fraud or untoward actions, and there are a lot of suspect things, sure, ballot harvesting, ballot chasing, etc., procedural issues where judges threw out various lawsuits and things like this. There were 48 states embroiled in a lawsuit over whether or not the election was legal. They don't talk about that, do they? Now, witnessing all of these things and hearing this, Donald Trump and his team probably more so sounded like this. Trump going, there was fraud. What is this thing in Michigan I'm seeing? And then you've got a lawyer being like, we've got questions about the TCF Center. You've got this Detroit thing, and we've got to have an investigation of this. Do we have time to do it? I don't think we do, but we should go after these people because it looks like something untoward happened. That's probably how it really sounded. So here's what happens. If Trump prevails and wins in 2024, despite all of this, The narrative in the history books will say in 2020, there was fraud. Donald Trump tried to stop it. His legal team, valiant heroes, did everything they could, but realizing that the task before them was insurmountable, did the only thing reasonable and retreated, thus handing over power to a corrupt establishment political class that was seeking to destroy the United States. In 2024, after going about the traditional, normal, rational, legal, and reasonable process of being reelected, they reopened the investigations, weeded out the criminals, and thus saved this nation. That's the narrative written by Trump should he win in 2024. Should Trump lose in 2024, this will be the narrative that Donald Trump and his cohorts sought to seize power and lied in an attempt to subvert this nation. His followers staged an extremist revolutionary insurrection and failed. That's how they'll write it. And the interesting thing is, even if Trump wins in 2024, they could write it in the positive way that Trump is the hero. But it could be 10 years later when Trump then leaves office and the deep state returns that they once again rewrite the narrative. They go after him. They criminally charge him. History is written by the victors. And right now what we're looking at is the unraveled twine that has yet to be braided. Think of history as this way. Imagine there are a bunch of threads and they have not yet been pulled together and braided. And where we are is the point where the threads are coming together at that braid. As we move up, the timeline becomes a single piece of braided thread. Before us, we see all the variables and all the narratives which could come together. We don't know yet which one will be the definitive thread in our timeline. That's the narrative. And it could go in any direction, depending on which threads get pulled in and how it gets braided. That's how I see the timeline and the variables. That's how I see things changing. And right now, it could be any one of these things before us. Any one of these variables before us could come into play. It could be that in 20 years, we look back and all of the young people, there'll be 18-year-olds who were born 2 years after this day. And they will say things like, everybody knows Donald Trump was trying to steal power in this country. And we are fortunate enough that the powers of critical race theory and gender ideology came together with the multicultural democratic institutions to stop the evil, blah, 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 white supremacist regime. Maybe in 100 years, they say white supremacy ran rampant. And Donald Trump was the leader of white supremacy, and he tried to preserve it. Or it could go the other direction. It could be that communist forces sought to subvert the United States, and Donald Trump made his last stand. It'll be interesting to see how far it goes or where it goes. I don't know for sure. All I can tell you is, from where we're at, we see two things. The right is winning the culture war, period. Now, you can argue that they don't control enough cultural institutions, but when you see Disney losing nearly $1 billion on their last releases, Sound of Freedom at $150 million, Bud Light collapsing, the culture is shifting towards the right. When you see that 12th grade males skew heavily conservative, albeit young females skew liberal, don't think that matters. Because women tend to be more socially interested and men tend to be more object-oriented. In which case, the presumption is, as men pursue political endeavors and abstract endeavors, and females pursue social endeavors, the women will probably start skewing towards the males. I'm not saying that in any way that's derisive. I'm not saying that should be frowned upon or it's a thing not to be respected. Many women may say, "Oh, we don't follow men. We don't." No, I'm saying the women will seek to be more socially cohesive. The men will not. Thus, the pressure is on females. I'm not saying this means that all females and all liberals will cease to exist. I'm saying it will just create a skewing pressure among many young women. But it's not absolute. With that, I think the direction of this country likely will skew to the right because of cultural issues. And what we're seeing with the Democrats and the liberals is a desperate attempt to wield what little power they have left. The indictment against Donald Trump is laughably absurd. That Trump said stay peaceful, that proves it. Now, of course, they've got a judge that is going to be on their side. But I don't see these things. I don't see them working when the culture is shifting away from them, when young men are shifting away from them. It's not going to work. You're not going to be able to maintain this power if you're losing culture, and they are. But you know what? Many will probably look back on a video like this. It'll be in the history books. Who knows? And they'll say, boy, was that guy wrong about everything. That's the reality. I don't know. Hindsight is 2020. Y'all in the future are going to look back and you're going to know way better than me. Or it may be that y'all look back and believe stupid nonsense written by the victors, lies and manipulations. And how would you know? You wouldn't. How am I supposed to know that history is real today? I don't. We just cross our fingers and trust what we can trust. So we'll see. Y'all probably already saw. Who knows? Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.